Hi, welcome to the Property Show. I'm Jayashree Kurup. I'm editor MBTV. I have with me Sharad Mittal. He is the CEO of Motilal Oswal Real Estate. Thanks, Sharad, for joining us.
Thank you, Yashvi.
We're discussing the risks of lending to real estate. The real estate sector is going through a crisis, not brought on by itself this time. It is a part of a larger crisis, but it has been a sector in a crisis for the last few years, right? And today the real estate sector is actually almost pleading for a last mile funding to complete projects which have been held up for various reasons. Sharad, you have been lending to the real estate sector. You have a portfolio of over 1,000 crores. Let us understand what are the first risks that you would assess before you lend to a real estate.
Yeah. So, Jayashree, that's the risk in real estate. There is a very vast subject. There are various variables that goes in before assessing. But if I have to simplify a little bit, I would say three things which one has to look before giving money to a real estate developer or lending or investing into real estate. First and foremost is the counterparty. This is one business where the counterparty risk needs to be mitigated. What I mean by that is that there are just too many developers in India. By some surveys, the number of developers in India are more than 50,000. And there are so many developers because there were no entry barriers. But over a period of last 3 years, the dynamics around business have changed. So you need to first assess the counterparty. What do you assess them on their track record? Or their projects, how have they dealt with their existing lenders, with their consumers. You do their referencing. Then you look at their balance sheet. You look at their debt profiling. So the first risk that you need to see is that who's the person with whom you're going to do business with. And like everybody knows, there is a bit of opaqueness in real estate in data and availability of information. So a lot of it happens by spending time in the industry. You get to know a lot of it just by being there for a long period of time. The second risk, which is more fundamental, which comes in any kind of investing, is underwriting of the project. You would look into project closely. You look at the micro market. You look at the city, then the micro market, then you look at that project. Whether the project has enough margins, what kind of demand supply scenario is in that micro market, and basis on that you form an opinion. That is something that has to be done more on the basis of data available, and I think there is fair bit of availability of data as far as the demand supply is concerned. Once it passes these two musters, then you go to the third one, which will be the diligence part of it. You look at legalities involved into the project. You look at the technical stuff, what can be built, what kind of approval timelines will be there, what kind of cost is there, and some of the other periphery diligences around the project, whether it is fundamentally right to do that besides just the commercial decision. And then there are various other drivers which will be there in place of the smaller nature. But these three large risks you need to mitigate.
If you look at the lending pattern, the funding pattern of real estate, about the developers' equity was about 20-25%. Another 20-25% came out of the project funding. And a very large part, the 50%, was based on, especially residential real estate, was on the consumer, the retail finance coming in, the consumer funding, right? When the consumer stopped buying in large numbers, that's when the crisis happened. Do you think that we need to change this ratio? Does the developer need more skin in the game for the lenders to be more interested?
Yeah. So let's look at how the business model has changed, actually. I think, and that's where the core of the entire challenge is coming. Right. Let me take you a little bit into the history of how the real estate has evolved, Indian real estate, especially residential in India. It really took off in 2001 with the India growing at massive pace, global liquidity, mortgage rates collapsing, and a lot of things coming in together. We had newer cities like Bangalore, Pune, Hyderabad emerging. And that gave way to a lot of developers coming into the business. At that point of time, banks used to do funding for both land approval and construction. Fundamentally, in real estate, you require money in two stages: for the purpose of buying land and approvals, and second, for the purpose of construction. Banks were doing both. And the consumer used to lap up to buy. I remember those days in 2000 when I started working. Every 10 days, prices used to go up, and developer used to be in a negative equity in 3-6 months. By the time we reached 2007, and our central bank, which is RBI, saw this as an asset bubble getting built. And before the GFC, they took a decision that the stage one, which is for the purpose of buying land and approval, banks will not do the funding.
Yeah.
And that gave way to a lot of real estate fund coming into the business. People like us, and there are a lot of other domestic funds which looked this as an opportunity and wanted to fill up the vacuum which was created by this. And 2009 onwards, we had a lot of real estate funds coming in and giving the land stage funding to real estate developers. And subsequently, the construction finance used to come from the banks. Came 2013-14 with the new government, then the BJP government coming in with a lot of euphoria. A lot of NBFCs also started lending money. And so then we saw an era of 5 years, 2013 to 18, as I say, golden 5 years for NBFCs. And they gave a lot of money as debt to real estate developer. They became the primary source of debt for real estate developers. And they were largely doing construction finance, but they used to be a little fungible doing the land stage as well.
Yeah.
And then the ILFS crisis happened.
Yeah.
So this ILFS crisis, and if you look 2 years before that, the demonetization in November 2016, RERA of May 2017, and ILFS crisis in August 2018, in a matter of 1.5 years, the entire variables on which the business was run was completely changed.
Yeah.
It got regulated. Demonetization happened, it got regulated, and then there was a liquidity challenge because of the NBFCs were going slow. So right now where we stand, we have a legacy issue. Going forward, of course, the developers needs to put in more equity. There is no doubt about that.
Yeah.
There has to be more accountability because of the regulation. How do you resolve the baggage? How do you resolve these projects which have been funded by heavy debt? Consumers are not very forthcoming for various reasons. How do you unlock that? That's where we are kind of stuck. But I have no doubt in my mind the way the business is done in real estate, it's structurally changed. You need to buy land with equity or equity-like money, get approvals,
Yeah.
start selling only once you have the certainty around all your approvals and licenses.
Yeah.
And a lot of it will be sold during the course of the project, and a lot of it will be sold in the end. So the entire capital stack needs to be relooked.
That's right. When real estate is backed by a collateral, a strong collateral. However, when you was it the lack of due diligence by the lenders that led to this crisis that the banking system went through, or is it that the system itself? I mean, the process was flawed.
I don't think so. The process was flawed, actually. See, what happens is real estate, one thing that we have to understand vis-a-vis any other asset class, say, for example, capital markets or equity markets, the real estate, the corrections are very long and painful in nature.
Yes.
So today, if you hear a news about some publicly listed company, it will have a reaction tomorrow morning and it will get reset. But in real estate, it becomes illiquid. So for a longish period of time, the asset becomes illiquid. The corrections are more in nature of time correction than price correction. And also what happens is, I think whenever there is a reset, let me draw a parallel with some of the other asset classes. Let's take capital markets, or let's take insurance.
Yeah.
All asset classes goes through a maturity period. Bombay Stock Exchange, BSE was started in 1978 and 92, 93 till Harshad Mehta scam happened. All kind of things used to happen. People used to look at, I remember whenever I speak to my father about stock market, his standard thing is it's a satta bazaar. So because in his days, he probably had that kind of an impression. Then SEBI was set up in 94. And now you look over a period of 20 years, how the control has been brought in, rules and regulation. Same is for insurance. IRDA was set up in 2000. Prior to that, there were only public sector enterprises. And post IRDA was set up, the rules were laid down, consumer was protected, and you had so many new companies coming in. I think we need to look at real estate in the same light. Bull run started in 2002-03.
Yeah.
It was a free run till 2016-17. Regulator came in. The rules and regulations have been put into the place. We need to see that the consumer needs to be protected.
Yes.
This is the biggest purchase an individual makes in his lifetime. he cannot be treated the way he got treated during within certain micro markets. So I would say key here is the consumer.
Yeah.
And I come back to whole thing that developers realizes it. They have gone through a tough period of 5 years.
Yeah.
We need to solve the legacy.
Mm.
And I think that's where the government probably need to do a little bit more. Provide that helping hand, not in terms of fiscal support. I
Yeah.
think restructuring will solve what the industry is asking, and I don't think so. Uh, what they are asking is that all the stakeholders should be given time to solve the problem.
Mm.
It cannot be solved in 3 6 months because there is a large loan which is been given to real estate developers. You give it a 3 5 years kind of a period to really unlock the challenges which has been there. And of course there are new landscape, and whatever business is done now is done within the new landscape.
That's right. And do you think, what do you think is holding the government back? Let's look at the flip side of it. As a governance mechanism, what are the rules that they have to put in place today?
I think government has done their bit. There were excessive which were built from a real estate developer's perspective, and you would have heard about the entire Noida fiascos that happened in 2014-15, which led to a lot of outcry, rightly so, and that got RERA into the place and GST and so many other things. I think if I have to be very frank, I think developers don't enjoy a great credibility with policymakers, and that's the unfortunate part. Developers have credible bodies, but I think there is certain perception around developers, and uh, developer also have to come across as somebody who is consumer focused, who's because eventually this business is extremely important from economy perspective. It contributes to 8 9% of the GDP. It's the second largest employer after agriculture, and it supports almost 50 odd industries. So it can't be limping. It can't be left on its own. What is the government? Why the government is not doing that part? I think government focus is pretty clear, and the agendas around real estate is around affordable housing. That's where the narrative is, and I think my sense also is that the government wants to play the entire real estate reforms through the consumer. So if you really see over a period of last 3 4 years, the policies that they have brought in have largely have come through the consumer, with whether it is the affordable housing scheme, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, CLSS scheme, the increase in the loan limits, and so on and so forth. I think having a direct handout to a developer, or giving direct benefit is something they are hesitant upon. Maybe because of some of the experiences or the narratives around real estate developers. But I think I would really urge government to look at more holistically, because the sector is important.
If you were to look at the 25,000 crore real estate fund that has been set up, the last mile funding, currently only about 1,000 crores have been given out, but I see a large number of applications have been made. If you were to give your advice to developers, what are the 4 or 5 things that they should be doing right before they go in for that last mile funding?
Actually, there have been a lot of talks around that fund, and that out of 25,000, 1,000 odd has been done. I happens to know, because we are in the same industry, they are working really hard. They have really ramped up very quickly. If I remember it correct, this 25,000 crore fund was announced in somewhere in November, December. For such large amount, you need to have processes and people in place.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, March the lockdown happened, so those guys have actually got only couple of months to put things into the place. But if they're able to do 1,000, that's a credible amount. It's not easy to really put out large amounts, but because idea is to also get back the money with the return and they complete the projects. I think from a developer perspective, they need to understand what is the primary objective of that fund. Primary objective of that fund is to get home buyers in a stuck projects delivery of their house.
That's right.
There are other stakeholder in those projects. There will be existing lender.
Mm.
So more than the developer, the existing lender and the last mile fund which is coming, they need to create an understanding among themselves.
That's right.
That it has to be seen more like a partnership.
Yeah.
And of course, developer needs to follow the requirements of the new fund, because eventually the kind of developers who are going to get this money uh, don't have too many options. They need to be more accommodative. In fact, accommodative is a soft word. They will have to follow the instructions coming out of there, uh, because eventually the houses needs to be delivered. Gone are the days where you can delay the projects, and you can get away with it. I don't think the situation is there anymore. But there is a lot of other money also sitting on the sides for the last mile. Not only the SBI fund, but there are a lot of other interest. We also have just finished raising a fund, and we are also keen on doing last mile, because we believe from a overall environment perspective, last mile is something which is a missing link. And from our opportunity perspective, we believe this is a good opportunity to put out that money.
So when you do a last mile funding, what are how do you ensure the safety of that lending?
Actually, one critical point which is missing here, and we have been urging as a industry to the government, is what is a last mile? Last mile is that there is an existing project which is facing some challenges because there is a additional amount required to complete the project because of lack of sales, or the project probably could get better pricing when it gets completed, and there is an existing lender. The entire concept of last mile is that the lender who comes in now, or the investor who comes in now, comes in last but goes out first with their desired return. So there is a concept of first charge and second charge.
Yeah.
So the existing lender becomes a second charge junior lender, and the first one becomes a senior lender. This is something which can be achieved by doing an intercreditor agreement between the existing and the new lender. Unfortunately, the current IBC norms says that for whatever reason, if this project goes subsequently into IBC, this first charge, second charge preference is lost, and both the lenders are at equal footing.
Which is what is stopping the funds from coming in, right?
Yeah. So the fund who are coming as a last miler, they're saying, look, I am taking the risk, maximum risk. I am coming in rescuing the project, and this is our current understanding, and that should hold through the entire project life, even if it goes to the IBC. Fortunately, for State Bank Fund, government has created a special dispensation.
Right.
And they have this, in their case, they remain a first charge and they don't lose that preference. But any other fund, they loses. So in that case, if a new fund or investor has to come in with an uncertainty that they can lose their preference, a lot of them will not be able to do it. So if they make this tweaking, I think there is a large amount of money sitting to come into the last mile.
So is this something that you've already asked the governance, the policymakers?
There have been various representations which has been done, and what I understand, the government is looking into it.
Okay. Okay. Now we've talked about the macros. I'm going to come back to your fund. When you lend to a developer, and let's early stage developer, what is the volume of fund that you bring to the developer? Is it in terms of percentages of the total? When do you bring it? How do you release funds?
Okay, so let me just give you a little background. We manage 4 funds. We just finished raising our 4th fund. We were lucky. We closed it in February 2020. It was a 1,200 crore fund. Yeah. Cumulatively, we managed close to 3,500 crores over a period of last 6 years, which has been the challenging period of real estate. We have done 65 transactions. We have an investment strategy around which we do investing. So we largely have stayed out of Delhi and Bombay. We focused in IT cities, where we believe the IT companies were doing reasonably well. Pre-COVID also, our economy was struggling a little bit. It's just the post-COVID, the things have become a little bit more tougher, but it's not that the economy was rousing and doing great things before that. So we focused on IT cities. We work only with large, meaningful developers, is what the way we have our own way of identifying such developers. We do only mid-income housing. We don't do low-cost housing. We don't do high-end. We focus typically on 4,000 to 6,000, the typical middle class. We believe India's story is best played through the middle class. Largely structured transaction at a land stage. Because we believe that structurally, a good large developer should be able to raise money from the banks once the approvals are in place. Because post that he's eligible to get money from the bank. So we typically do land at a land stage. we would put in like say 60%, 65% of the money project to project, and the rest of the money is brought in by the developer. Approval timelines are varying between 8 to 24 months from city to city, and subsequently a construction finance money comes in, and we then see through the project together. Out of the 65 transactions, we have done 30 exits as well during this period. So we remain active. Only thing is that given the COVID period, and we're talking about risk, I keep saying that we are in the business of taking risk, and that's where we want to generate higher return. Unfortunately, right now, I'm not able to put my hands around the risk, what kind of risk and how deep they are. Probably will wait for lockdown to open a little bit more, maybe form an opinion post that, and we'll then invest the current fund.
How many projects were you expected to exit during this period? I mean, how many projects have been set? How many exits have been set back because of a COVID delay?
No, so actually, it's a very short period. It's been only 3 months. So I would look at this way that there are certain projects. We had 7 projects to be launched on Gudi Padwa, and the auspicious period. All of them have got pushed. But I don't think so. We had any planned exits during this period, but by and large, what we are seeing base case is that all the projects, residential projects, will get pushed by 3 to 9 months in their delivery and execution, and more towards the 9 month is my view. And our exits and our timelines also would get impacted accordingly.
And you're able to buffer that, right? That is something that you can build into your plans.
Yes.
One of the major stumbling blocks in the sector is the delayed approvals, right? When RERA came in, one of the promises that was made by the government was that there would be a 6-month window, and within 6 months, all approvals would be cleared. But approvals do seem to take up to 24 months. How does that impact, and how do you factor that into your lending?
Yeah. So I think I think it's absolute. When RERA was coming, one of the demands from the developers and some other stakeholders was that there should be level playing field. The authority should also be accountable under the RERA. Unfortunately, it's land is a state subject, and within the state, within the city also, a city like Bombay will have 10 kinds of approval, maybe more different drivers working. So we need to live with that uncertainty. It's a slow process, but I would say it has improved. See, what do you need in approval? You need predictability.
Yeah.
You don't want unpredictability. You want one level playing field. So if it comes in 12 months, it should come in, say, 12 to 14 months. And if anyone else can get it, I should also be able to get it. I want these two kinds of predictability. Whether I want super efficiency that I should get it in 30 days, yes. But I think given the way we are organized as a sector and a country and everything, that probably will take time. But I would say there is predictability which has come.
Yeah.
I remember 2010, 11, 12, the entire environmental approvals used to be like really challenging. You are not able to think through whether it will take 3 months or 30 months. I think we have fair predictability. Which cities will take 20 months, which cities will take 8 months, and which will take more. And you have to underwrite accordingly. You have to build that timeline as part of the project timeline and work around it.
So a lot of consumers, investors actually, who enter the real estate sector for varying periods of time, they have all exited the industry. But there is a lot of appetite among investors to still come back to real estate. The stock markets are not performing great. Other assets are not. There's a lot of, when there's uncertainty, real estate is a tangible asset.
Yes.
What does it take to bring that investor back? And how can you give him the predictability that there is a return?
Yes. So I'll tell you, this is a very good question. Actually, I've been thinking because the sector needs investors to come in. The sector cannot just run on the end user demand. I'll tell you the challenge, what has happened, and I'll give you 3-4 drivers which I believe should get investors and the home buyers back. I'll tell you what has happened to my mind. Over a long period of time, the residential real estate has given returns which are between 12 to 14%. If you take it from, say, 40-year period, that's the kind of return it has given. A rental yield of 2-3% and a capital appreciation of 8 to 10%, a combined return of 12 to 14%. What happened between 2002 and 12? The rental yield remained at 2%, but the capital appreciation went off the roof.
Yeah.
It was like 20% plus kind of a return,
Right.
capital return between 2002 and 2007, and then 2008 to 11. So the return that the real estate gave were more like 25, 28%.
Right.
That was abnormal.
Yeah.
And since 2013, prices are stagnated. It's been 7 years. It probably will remain stagnated. When you again look back from 2002, the average return will come down to 12%. I think return expectation needs to get moderated. People benchmarking their return expectation to 2002 to 2012 return will get disappointed. And the negative or zero return over a period of last 7 years and probably next couple of more years is because there's an excess return which has come between 2002 and 12.
So whoever made money then, they went away with the money, but the returns have to be evened out over a period of time.
Yes, it got averaged out. And a country where the risk-free return is 4.5%, 5%, where mutual funds over a 5, 10, and 15-year period on a SIP return, on a rolling return, is also given 12, 14%.
Yes.
See, so I think return expectation of 15%, 12 to 15% has to be. Now, what will bring back? Three things in my mind. First and foremost, the residential real estate used to be a large allocation within the portfolio of Indian middle class.
Yes.
And Indian HNI also.
Yeah.
If you go back and speak with anyone, they would say, I have this project coming in my neighborhood or in my hometown, and they will end up buying something there, and over a period of time they'll pay and they'll get a moderate or good returns on that. After 2014, because of the way the issue was managed by real estate developers, especially I would keep saying Noida because that's where it actually blew up first. These investors started moving out, and they kind of absent now. A lot of this money went into non-real assets, which I say bonds and equities, because they are non-real. They are not touchy. They're just paper, but a lot of money went into it. The kind of volatilities that we have seen in equity market and now in debt market as well with Franklin Templeton, I believe some bit of that money should get started reallocating to residential real estate with a lag. Let the thing settle is the one. Second thing is property prices have been stagnated for 7 years. What I could have bought for say 5,000 rupees a square feet in 2013, I can buy it for same price.
Yes.
Where wage inflation is 7-8% and country's GDP has grown. So there is a correction. Affordability has come. Couple of more years, if you take out the Bombay, which is a very funny city, coastal city, and the prices are obnoxious, but rest of the India, if prices are stagnated for 10 years, it makes it very, very affordable.
Yeah.
I think that would also be one reason I see that the end users and some of the investors will come. And third is the interest rate. We are at 15-year low as far as the mortgage rates are concerned. And I keep telling to people in Bombay and Delhi that they don't see this as a big driver. Go down to IT city and a person who's taking a 40 lakh loan on a 1% rate cut, I think his EMI goes down by 5,000 rupees, which is a big number for somebody who's making say 70,000 to 1 lakh rupees. And it makes it more affordable. So I think combination of these 2-3 things, but with a lag. We need to see this debt unwinding happen, and then we'll see Resi. I have no doubt in my mind that the Resi will start getting allocations from investors, home buyer, once this trust part is addressed, which will take a little bit more time.
You know, a lot of people when they think of putting money into real estate, they earlier it used to be a 5 to 7 period safe return period, and you would get your 12-15% return. In the unnatural returns period, you could churn your money in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. It was good enough. Today, what's happened is that the investor himself doesn't know how long to allocate his money into real estate for. And if you're an investor, you can't be emotional. You have to know, you have to have an exit strategy. That exit strategy seems to be eluding the investor class.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. When will the investors come back? The demand supply in real estate sector, if you take out say Bombay and Delhi, and definitely Delhi, the demand supply, the number of months inventory overhang is very high. But if you look at the IT cities, it has fallen down close to 20 months. Yeah. So you have close to 20 months of inventory overhang. And because of RERA liquidity challenges, for last, if I am right, for last 3 years, each year new supply is less than the that year's fresh consumption. So it's a self-correcting mechanism. It takes time. Maybe 2 years from now, we'll see a period where this inventory overhang falls down to 12, 15 months. And that's the time you'll start seeing some bit of price kicking up.
Right.
See, FOMO effect is going to play out whenever these numbers will get readjusted. Fundamental is demand supply of the concept. Whenever that happens, and this 5,000 goes to 54, 5,300, lot of people who have been sitting and sees that, look, this is going up. A lot of people will come up, and that will bring the next cycle. Unfortunately, with the kind of debt the sector is sitting and the challenges the NBFCs are facing, we need first see the debt unwinding taking place, and then only this cycle will start.
So what comes first? A policy? What is the first solution here?
In my mind, first solution is to solve the legacy.
Yeah.
Everybody will have to come together. Mistakes have been made. You can't blame just a developer, because everybody will have to come together. Because just going after, say developer is been the primary reason for the mistake. But I think restructuring should be one thing which should really give a breather to the sector from a legacy perspective to be solved. And going forward, I think it has to be done within the and developers have fairly very well accepted the way the RERA has come in. I have not seen anyone who's flaunting the rules around RERA. So I'm not too worried for the projects which will come in the future. But for solving the legacy, we would require one-time restructuring. And I think that would be the only thing that comes to my mind. And of course, the consolidation is inevitable. I think
it's already started, right?
It's already started. Some bit of price correction would also happen. And right now, whenever we chat with our developer partners and some of the other stakeholders in the business, right now, cash flow is more important than profitability. And our ministers and policymakers and some of the other senior bankers have been fairly vocal about it. And I think this unwinding of debt, along with the existing inventory overhang, this is something which will get resolved in next 2 years. My only worry here is that the entire debt unwinding should not have a hard landing. If it has a hard landing, we don't want to have more names getting added to, say, the existing list of ILFS, DHFL, and Altico.
That's right.
And if you don't want to have a hard landing, you will require a regulatory intervention.
And that regulator should be the RERA?
No, in this case, the banking regulator, NHB or an RBI or Ministry of Finance, because their intervention, if you don't want a hard landing, because they are, look, NBFCs haven't got moratorium for their own borrowings, but they have to give moratorium. Some of these things don't add up in my mind that anyway, the sector is, NBFCs are struggling. And so I think unwinding has to take place. If it happens over a period of 3 to 5 years, it will be more smoother. Some more elbow room has to be given for unwinding of this. But if there is a hard landing of this, I think Delhi and Bombay would face more challenges than the other cities.
So Sharad, these have been challenging times for you as well. How did your fund stay above water? What is it that you did right? Maybe a 101 for others.
Yeah, so I think I keep saying that first and foremost, to the strategy, our strategy worked well. So we in 2013 felt that Delhi and Bombay is frothy markets, and IT probably would be a big driver, would remain largely immune to whatever internal challenges. Doing only mid-income housing, and that point of time, there were no affordable housing schemes and things like that. And there also, we looked at very simplistically. We said, we are not going to do low-cost housing, bottom of the pyramid housing. We'll do middle-class housing, 40 to 80 lakhs. Partnering with the right partners, developers, and scaling up with them. And I think what has worked for us is also we are very active managers. So I think everybody raises money or invests with the differentiator is the strategy and the execution of that. And I think that's where we kind of got a little lucky as well.
3 things that you think can keep this market afloat. First, you said that there has to be restructuring, and that it's being thought about. With restructuring, a lot of developers will be able to keep their head above water.
Yes, I think a lot of developers and NBFCs.
Okay. Yeah.
So you need to see in the value chain.
Yeah.
In value chain, it's like a pyramid.
Yeah.
So there are consumers. So on a matrix, if there are 1 lakh consumer, there are 1,000 developers with a 50 NBFCs, and that money is borrowed from 20 banks with a regulator on the top. So you have a pack of card. So the pack of card, in the pack of card, what is struggling right now, of course, the developer, but ahead of the developer, above the developer is the NBFC. If that thing, the whole thing will come off. So I think it will really be important from our lending ecosystem, the restructuring. Second, the sales needs to take place. Eventually, no amount of financial engineering can resolve the problem. How can you just by kicking the can and doing this and refinance and this? Eventually, the goods needs to be sold. The customer needs to come in, and for that, whatever is required, whether if that means the prices have to be cut, it has to be cut. You need to get the consumer and collect the money. I think that's the second most important thing. Third important thing is, I think the government probably has to be more look at, and the developer probably needs to work towards building that trust with the entire ecosystem, not only with the consumer, but with the regulator and the policymaker as well. And let me tell you, I interact with a lot of developers. People are seeing them in the light of the way they used to operate in 2000, say 5 to 12, 13. They have really struggled in last 5 years. They have really struggled. The way of their doing business, their conduct is completely changed. But unfortunately, they keep getting judged by what the way the things played out, say a decade back. I think everybody should give them one more opportunity to redeem themselves. They're really contributing to nation building, if you really see in that way.
And one of the developers I spoke to said that actually to bring the consumer back, that real estate always works on a shortfall. If they know that if I don't buy today, tomorrow the prices will go up to 5,200, 5,300 from 5,000, they will start buying. But today, like you said, there is no shortfall. They know that they can wait till tomorrow. The consumer needs to buy. The prices, the interest rates have come down to an all-time low. Despite that, the consumers are not coming out in droves. So clearly, it's not only an end user. You need to bring that investor back into the market, right?
Yeah, and Jashi, absolutely right. And this will happen with time.
Yeah.
You cannot rush into it.
Yeah.
First, this demand-supply equation is changing slowly as the new supply is reducing. Give it a couple of more years. At least in the IT cities, we'll be looking at 15 months kind of an inventory. Okay. If I recollected right, when I used to do 2006-07, the inventory overhang used to be more like 8-10 months, if I remember it right. So I think if it comes down to 12-15 months, the demand-supply equation will start changing. That would lead to price rise. This will lead to a FOMO effect on a lot of people who've been sitting, and you see. And this price rise you need to see across the board. So in the sense of Bangalore city, not only one pocket or one developer or a couple of developers, across the board. But before that, you need to establish trust as the other factor, which is more fundamental.
Price cut could be the starting point?
I don't think so, price cut. I think the problem is this, just too many legacy projects, like which SBI fund, I remember they were mentioning there are like 1,500 stuck projects. And that is something, how do you solve that part? There are 1,500 stuck projects, and there will be in projects, assume 100 to 200 home buyers. So these 3 lakh home buyers, maybe more, are stuck. And how do you resolve that part? But there is no doubt in my mind that with time, the demand supply and the prices, if they remain stagnated, it makes it very affordable. And maybe a couple of more years. I put 24 months as the period for that. We would see more buyers coming in, but we need to be cautious on one thing, which is, I believe, is that what we have seen in India, the real estate bull runs are largely price rise, price linked. I believe the next one will be more velocity linked. People are going to make quick money, like buy it at 5,000 and flip it at 5,500, and by the time the project is finished, it is 8,000. Those kind of price rise, but it'll be more velocity. that 5 probably will move to 6 during the course of the project, but the volumes will be large. And that will be more healthy and sustainable.
And this you expect in the next give it a period of 2 years before this.
Post 2 years, because this 2 years, I believe there will be unwinding of debt that will take place.
And will a lot of developers have to exit the market? Do you think they have the staying capacity till this 2-year period is over? Because there's a lot of stress in the system.
I think because not only because of COVID is one of the events which have happened, but I think structurally the business is changed.
Yeah.
You are regulated now. You cannot launch the project once till the time approvals are in place. Whatever you receive, a part of it you have to keep in the escrow. You have large accountability towards consumer. There are financial punitive penalties. So from an unorganized sector, overnight it became fully organized with a retrospective effect.
Yeah.
So and there is why so many people came in. Like it's always said that wherever there is abnormal profit, unlimited capital chases there. And that's what has happened. There was seen as a pot of gold and unlimited. That's why there's so much capital and players coming. There is not, those kind of margins are absent. And a lot of people will have a natural exit going out of this business because the business does not offer those kind of abnormal profits. And regulated environments, the number of developers definitely will get reduced.
Thank you so much, Sharad. That was very insightful, and we'd love to keep in touch with you.
Thank you, Jayashree. Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Bye.